There's a lot of really awesome colors available for painting your tabletop miniatures, but I think true joy comes from mixing your own. This allows you to dial in the perfect colors that you want to use rather than relying on something straight out of the tube. I want to take a look at how we can use mixing colors to create really realistic, desaturated, earthy skin tones for painting up some orcs. The first color mix I want to look at is Zemezi Desert and Imperial Blue. One of the first things we learn about mixing colors is that yellow and blue make green. However, Zemezi Desert's already a little desaturated, and Imperial Blue is a purple-leaning blue. On a traditional color wheel, yellow and purple are opposite of one another on the color wheel, making them complementary colors. This means when you mix them together, you'll get something really desaturated and kind of muddy. So when we mix our yellow Zemezi Desert with our blue Imperial Blue, that purple will help to desaturate this mix, giving us a nice desaturated green color. I mix Imperial Blue into the Zemezi Desert to create a color that's between the two. A nice balanced transitional color which I'll refer to as the midtone. When mixing colors, the darker value tends to dominate the mix, so in reality our nice middle color will have more Zemezi Desert in it. I start applying paint and just blocking in some color. I think of every section or muscle group as an object and paint the underneath part with pure Imperial Blue to act as a shadow. I then paint the top parts with our midtone, doing a bit of quick wet blending where they meet. This is a great starting point since it quickly establishes shape and color, and going from here ensures that the shadows on the top of the figure will never be as deep as those underneath, helping to create volume. I'm using a larger brush for this, I think it's a size 3. This helps for adding color quickly and my paint is quite thin just to keep it nice and smooth. Once those two colors are placed, I then add more Imperial Blue to the mix and smooth out the transitions where the shadows are. This leaves the pure saturated Imperial Blue only in the deepest parts of the model and strictly on the underside. Then I add more Zemezi Desert to the midtone and place this only on the upper parts of the model, like the tops of the muscles, the face, and the upward facing parts of the fingers and hands. Once these colors have been placed, let the model dry, as continuing to work while it's drying can tear up the paint layers and cause an unwanted texture. It's at this point that I paint the eyes and the inside of the mouth. Now is a great time to do these hard to reach areas, as the layering isn't very involved and any mistakes will be easy to correct. For the eyes, I go in with Warlord Purple, which is more like a pink. And for the tongue and inside of the mouth, I mixed in some charred brown to give it a deeper burgundy color, which is then highlighted with Warlord Purple. As it stands, the coverage is a bit patchy, but all the colors are in the right spots. I go in with additional layers of paint, improving coverage and glazing to improve the transitions between colors. Also, taking this opportunity to push the highlights a bit around the upper back and shoulder with more Zemezi Desert added to the mix. A person's face and hands are typically a different hue than the rest of their body. This is due to how the blood sits under the skin and other factors. To emulate this in the orcs, I create a final highlight by taking Zemezi Desert and adding just enough Imperial Blue to it to tint it green. I add this to the raised parts of the facial features and ears, as well as the fingers where they would be catching the light. This color isn't as desaturated as the rest since it's mostly Zimezi Desert. This gives these areas a bit of flush, making them lively but also orky. For the teeth and claws, I start with dried bark and highlight it by adding incremental amounts of white. I'm really happy with the completed look. The saturated blue shadows complement the desaturated green, and I love how the ochre tones from the Zimezi Desert are present. The bit of saturation in the face and fingers really helps to harmonize the skin tone and creates a lot of visual interest. I really love how this came out, but I want to push it and see how far I can get this desaturated look. To do that, I'm going to replace Imperial Blue with NATO Black. Most black paint isn't actually a true neutral black. Instead, a lot of the time they're desaturated, really dark browns or blues. In this case, NATO Black has a ton of blue to it. By adding a color of lighter value like Zimezi Desert, we're going to bring out a lot of that blue color, and then the yellow is going to mix with that, creating a really desaturated green. The second orc was done largely the same way. I begin by mixing a midtone, however instead of using the pure darker color, I'm actually going to mix in some Zimezi Desert into the NATO Black to create our shadow color. This just helps to make the shadows more interesting than if pure NATO Black was used. I block in these two colors and then incorporate more Zimezi Desert to start hitting the tops of each section of muscle and the face. This one's pose is interesting with his arms outstretched above him creating shadows, so I avoid anything that would fall directly under them, instead focusing on the upper back, shoulders, and arm muscles that are prominently visible. Once I've splashed on some color, I set it to dry. Then I continue applying these colors, working on coverage, attempting to make the transitions look painterly instead of patchy, and glazing when needed. For the final highlight, I take Zimezi Desert and add only enough NATO Black to tint it green, and focus on the raised areas of the face towards the front, as well as the mouth, ears, and fingers, focusing on the edges that would be facing the light. I also draw a thin line along those angular cheekbones and brow ridge, transitioning it into the rest of the head. It's important that some of the lighter colors from the previous steps got some decent coverage on the face before adding the final highlight, as you don't want the ridges and recesses in the face to be too dark. This one's pose is super striking, and I think the color combination is equally dramatic. I love how the shadows help to define and chisel out the muscle groups and back, helping to exaggerate the movement. The exposed chest allowed the color combo to really shine with those desaturated highlights framing the face. I really love this neutral olive color that we've created. I think it works super well for orcs. However, one thing I miss are those really nice saturated blue shadows. And what you could do is glaze in some color into the shadows to bring those back, but what I want to do is mix in a different color into Imperial Blue to see what great colors we can mix. I'm going to take orange brown and mix it with Imperial Blue. Orange and blue are also complementary colors, and mixing them together will give us a really desaturated result. Because the orange has quite a bit of yellow in it, that's also going to mix with the blue, making our desaturated mix really green leaning. For the third orc, the approach was super similar to the first one, but I knew I would have to push the highlights on the upper back and shoulder area even further due to how desaturated our colors were. This also meant that I could have a bit more pure blue snuck into the shadows. Despite the overall muddiness of the color on the palette, while color blocking had a nice lively quality to it, while still being realistic and desaturated. Once my initial color blocking was done and dry, I moved back in with a highlight consisting of orange-brown mixed into the midtone, ensuring that the overall model wasn't too dark. I hit all the raised areas of muscle along the top of the back, and made sure to get some coverage on the upward facing parts of the hands. The final highlight was orange-brown with the smallest amount of imperial blue. Not only did I use this to exaggerate the craggy features of the orc, but made sure to hit the topmost knuckles and fingers, as well as all the sinewy bits in the veins, creating some striking details. As a final touch, I flowed just the tiniest bit of watered down electric blue under the eyes to help them all stand out. This last orc might be the grittiest of the bunch, but I really love how his color scheme is very orky, a deep earthy green with lots of other interesting colors mixed in there. The warmth of the face and fingers descends into a deep desaturated green tone, only to then meet up with a saturated blue shadow, which only helps to reinforce the color choices. Overall, I'm super happy with how this trio of orcs has come out. Each color scheme adds something special, and is kind of a nice gradient of desaturation and greens. There's a really nice richness to all of these colors, while looking suitably realistic, but also eye-catching. There's lots of contrast, but also a lot of volume, since not everything is highlighted and shaded in unison. Shape comes from shadows, and our initial color blocking created a great foundation for all these fun colors to build upon. Hopefully this helps to demystify color mixing and shows how powerful using just two colors can be. There's really no wrong way to paint an orc, and I hope this has given you something else to consider while working on your models. Thanks for watching.